Right. We just wanted to have a little chat about aspects. It's 2 years since the care inquiry was reported. Yesterday they launched another redress scheme for phase 2, Lishen and all the rest of it. Alan Collins, you've been involved right from the very beginning. Jill, you've been involved obviously from the very beginning. And Neil McMurray, you've been involved also blogging on these issues right from the very beginning of this particular saga, the last 12 years, 13 years, whatever it is. One of the themes which we cannot get to grips with and we can't discuss sensibly is what do you do with people who have committed sex crimes? What for safety, so they don't do it again, to stop them doing it in the first place? All these issues, we can't seem to have a sensible discussion. Somewhere in the world, they must know what to do, mustn't they?
Well, some of your viewers will say, oh yes, they know what to do in certain parts of the world. They go to the ultimate sanction and execute people and send people away for life and so on. And there will be viewers and listeners who are also of that persuasion, that thought. Fine, but what I think we're going to try and talk about today is the second part of your question, which is how do we stop it from happening in the first place, which is a completely different aspect to what you do with people who've been caught sexually abusing children and how
there's a sort of a halfway house going on in this island with a lady called Cheyenne and in other places as well, where you set up on site, attract children or attract potential abusers of children, and you pretend to be a child wanting to have sex, attracting people who haven't necessarily had sex with children or offended sexually anyway, and you catch them and the police send them, prosecute them, and they get punished. They haven't done anything. Now, is that part of the process? Is that what must happen?
I suspect the general public will say that is a good thing, okay? What we need to do to have a sensible conversation, and agree with me or disagree with me, is that yes, people have very firm, strong opinions on all of this, and I'm not saying that they're wrong. What I'm interested in always is I see so much misery, so much damage, so much pain. I'd like to see a world where children don't get abused in the first place, and I would like to see personally a lot more effort in this debate on why it is that certain individuals turn out to be disposed, inclined, whatever the expression is, to abuse children, because most people don't do that, but there's a group of individuals who do. So in Norway, Scandinavia, there's been a lot of research, and my understanding of the research is that child abusers become child abusers as a result of some kind of genetic component, which then in a certain environment sort of triggers into them becoming potential sex offenders, paedophiles, or actually becoming paedophiles. So that, in my opinion, is very interesting, and I personally would like to see a lot of research into that to see what we can learn about that, because for me the ultimate objective is to stop all this misery happening in the first place.
For a small place like Jersey, is that realistic that Jersey could take on that sort of research? Because obviously that will require resources, medical professionals or people with...
It requires the combination of resources throughout the West.
Right.
No one country, in my opinion, can necessarily do all of this by itself. It requires a concerted effort across countries, particularly in the West, to deal with this.
You want to say something, Neil?
Well, I think, from my perspective, I pretty much agree with what Alan was saying. We've got to learn what makes these paedophiles tick. We need to understand them. As I gave evidence to the care inquiry, back in 2009, I said to the then Home Affairs Minister, what is in place for somebody who thinks they might have paedophilic tendencies, who find themselves attracted to children? Who can they go to? Where can they go?
Good question.
He wasn't interested. You know, it's let's wait till they've abused our children. Let's put them to prison. Now, I think, and I agreed with Alan when he at the care inquiry, and it'd be a good question to ask you, Alan, because you said, and which I totally agreed with, you could read the Hansard of 100 different care inquiries, and they'll all tell you the exact same thing. Reports from care inquiries. And I don't know how you feel, but I know this latest care inquiry report, it's exactly the same as any other report. I don't know if you've seen any difference in this report than any other ones that are out there.
You see, I think it's true, you know, time and time again, something terrible happens at the government, doesn't matter what government it is, they commission at great expense an investigation, inquiry, findings, and then a couple of years later, that whole thing gets repeated.
Yes.
You know, which is, you know, you tear your hair out of this, don't you? But yeah, I get what you're saying.
Jill?
And again, the very important point that you raised there, if somebody has concerns, they start thinking in a particular way and they're worried about it, yeah, where do they go to? Who do they turn to? Because always the fear is going to be they're going to get shot and they're going to get into trouble. And you don't want that to happen. You want the situation dealt with, ended, so whatever is going on, the risk is eliminated.
Yeah, this is really...
Joe, one of the controversial views, we were the Care Leavers Association, one of the controversial views was that people obviously don't want to say they've been abused, they're likely to be abusers, obviously. Now, there was a theory that was so. Have you got any knowledge on that?
I think there were a couple of cases at Hotel Agaran where they were abused and they went on to abuse.
Right.
I agree with Neil and Alan, but it's such a difficult one. I mean, in preparation for today, and we haven't had a lot of time, I've been reading a little bit, and there are so many different theories as to why people do this. Mental health issue. Well, you know, if that comes under a mental health issue, how do you deal with it? How do you approach it? The punishments for it, you know, as I say, people's opinions are so far apart that it's quite frightening.
You don't punish people for having cancer, do you?
You don't.
Now, if the person has got an illness which makes them do these sorts of things, punishing, you know, it's very the person who's been abused might want punishment, but there is not.
But you've got to look at it from the aspect that if putting paedophiles in prison worked, we wouldn't have a prison full of paedophiles. You know, it clearly doesn't work. It's time you're asking the question today that isn't being asked on an official level, you know, from a state level, you know, a judicial level. And this is the question, this is the conversation that now needs to be had. What's the punishment for paedophiles, you know, isn't working.
Well, again, so you've just raised lots of very interesting issues, and sorry to butt in, but it's important, I think, to point this out. So I think it was last month, so in England there was a sort of official idea, recommendation that certain first-time offenders should be dealt with outside the criminal justice system, and of course that sparked quite extreme reactions. Okay, so whether that will gain traction, somehow I now doubt, because of the extreme reaction that this proposal got. And getting back to what you've just said, yeah, it comes back to this. We've got to start thinking a lot deeper and more constructively if we're to try and reverse what, you know,
Stop the offence happening in the first place.
Well, if you think of it in terms of Alan Turing, the classic case, homosexuality was illegal.
Yeah.
And he was punished, put on chemical castration,
Yeah.
I believe, and
Yeah.
killed himself.
Yeah.
Since then, I mean, it's famously known, lots of people have had, they've been granted pardons for their offences, and homosexuality is not the offence it was. In fact, society has become remarkably liberated on all sorts of sexual issues. So the climate about sexuality, sexual behaviour
evolved.
is totally
Yeah.
different to when the standards were laid down for. But I won't even utter, I don't want to utter the word sex with children. It's about sexual offences. It's about the broader range of sexual offences. What amounts to a sexual offence? Now, obviously, that's not part of our discussion today. But people who get caught into that network and they get punished, what's gone wrong with them? What's gone wrong with their life?
That right, which comes back to what we were talking about right at the very beginning, is actually investing to try and find out why these people become what they are. So I think society is always going to say it's a complete no-no. We all get that. We will, that's not the debate. What the debate is about how we stop it happening in the first place. And we shouldn't confuse law and order, crime and punishment with trying to understand why it happens and to try and stop it from happening in the first place. I think people just get too emotive, they get too het up, and they go off on the deep end on all of this, and that's no criticism of that.
Just
because it provokes, understandably, very, very strong reactions.
Absolutely.
Get that. What we're talking about, I think, is put that to one side. It's about investing in the research so that this does not carry on into the future.
Yeah. But that will
Is there a
carry on.
place
Yeah.
for, sorry, at the moment that isn't in place, but people that are in prison for crimes against children, sex crimes against children, I'm taking it that, as with drug and alcohol addicts, there's no counselling for them in there or help for them whilst they're in there to talk about it.
Well, there are.
Not
there-
here anyway.
Well, okay. So, if you go to the UK, yes, there are programs that
There
these
are, mhm.
people are put on and so on. But that's after the horse
After
is
the
bolted.
event,
It's after the
yes.
event, isn't it? And what we're interested in is stopping the event happening in the first place.
Locking up paedophiles isn't protecting children. We should, again, the conversation needs to come back to protecting children, not punishing people who have already abused it. Let's stop them, and if the resources and finance was put into that, it would pay dividends. It would be a good use of public money rather than locking these people up and obviously ruining children's lives forever. Because then they sometimes, quite more often than not, need counselling. So I think even from an economic point of view, it's a no-brainer. You've got to.
In law, it's a different offence. Sex with young people is a different offence. But there are all sorts of sexual behaviours which are viewed. I mean, watching pornography is not an offence, but a lot of people would say it shouldn't be. People shouldn't be looking at pornography. Is there a relationship between pornography, watching pornography, and sex abuse? Is there a relationship, or are they?
Well, I think the experts would say there is some kind of link. We're sort of generalising here, and it all comes back to the need for there to be properly funded research into what makes an individual who appears to be law-abiding and all the rest of it deviate off that path.
Because the discussion, unfortunately, again, is about the punishment. There's a petition at the moment. 5,000 people have signed a petition in Jersey that there should be minimum standards for offences against children. There should be minimum standards, which is what will happen to that petition. I don't know if it'll go to the States and be discussed, but that's the concentration of thought. They're not 5,000 people saying we want some process to stop people committing offences, are they?
Yeah, and that's the challenge, isn't it? So, yes, you can understand why people get into the position where they have these very firm opinions and why there would be support for minimum sentences and so on. But again, it comes back to what we're talking about just now, which is also putting in the time, the effort, the resources, so that you don't have to have the criminal justice system getting so heavily involved in all this offending. We don't want the offending happening in the first place.
Where should the discussion, I mean, you're a lawyer, you deal with these, like lots of other lawyers, you deal with these cases because they come to court and you have to represent people. But do lawyers discuss these issues amongst themselves? Do you ever have discussions with them?
If those lawyers who have to deal with this, yes, there are those discussions, and indeed, as I said, I've just referred to the fact that there was this recommendation made in England last month about diverting, but of course that met an extreme reaction.
At what level was that discussion? Was
Was
it a general discussion?
No, in general, senior. I wasn't involved. Senior lawyers and people in law enforcement, that kind of world, looking at what we need to do, and they came up with that particular suggestion, which, if you think about it, deserves some thought, but it immediately generates, as I said, quite polarised positions on all of it. I get that, but it all comes back to what we keep on saying, which is some of this resource needs to be put in at the other end to stop it all happening in the first place.
You've mentioned the Scandinavian model.
Or the Scandinavian research.
Yeah. But different countries have different standards on all sorts of things. I mean, you can still be executed for homosexuality in some countries. I mean, the world is not identical. People, age of consent is not the same.
Well, I think in the Vatican, for instance, I think the age of consent has just been lifted to about 14, if I'm not too much mistaken. I mean, that's in the Vatican. So it seems like the Catholic Church seem to think it's okay to have sex with people under the age of 16. So it is. I think it is very much a cultural thing.
About 16 seems to be the general. It's not obviously. I think even strange enough, Madeira. I think they've got 14 as their age, which could cause problems because a lot of Madeirans in Jersey. That could cause problems for them if they're used to 14 as being the age. But I don't suppose the local courts would take a view on that.
Well,
would they?
it's we're coming to a position, aren't we, where we recognise that there's a role for crime enforcement, but there's also a role for
crime prevention.
Prevention. Yeah.
The thing is, how do you get people who have those tendencies before they've committed a crime to say, I'm a paedophile, help me?
Yeah, or they recognise that they've got a problem and they need the help.
They're not going to come forward willingly.
Yeah, but they're going to be scared that they're going to be
Exactly.
Reported to the authorities and everything that might flow from that. So I think it requires leaders in society to be prepared to have a grown-up conversation and be prepared to talk about the issues that we've been talking about and to ask the questions and to look for some answers. Until that happens, then all the tragedy and heartache and everything that we know about from all the investigations, inquiries will just carry on happening.
We better stop. You gave me 14 minutes and we've had 18 of them, so we better stop there. Thank you, Alan.
No, thank you.
The others?
Thank you very much.